So, hi, as a part of my second day of the speaking challenge which I'm doing, today I'm going to discuss about operating system. What is actually an operating system? What is the difference between the kernel space and the user space? Explained with the help of an example. So, what is operating system? Operating system is basically a manager between the user and the hardware that we are provided within the computer. So what it does, operating system acts as a manager and actually manages the hardware, that is the CPU, GPU, and the other hardware like disk, drivers, SSD, etc. So, why do we mainly use an OS? Why can't we actually directly use the programs and write code write code for each application separately? So it would be repetitive, and the memory access issue would be there. Like the memory is limited if one program tries to access the program memory. There could be crashes, and there could be privacy issues. Like, for example, you are running Google Docs and um, Zoom at the same time. So Zoom might try to steal your data within the memory. That's why we needed to come up with a robust thing which we now call the operating system. So it basically provides us privacy, fairness, and efficiency. So, what is the difference between the users? So, what does an operating system actually do before that? So, operating system mainly has four tasks. That is, the firstly, the process management. It actually creates processes, schedule time, how long the process will run for, or switches between the processes efficiently, which is called the context switching. Secondly, it also has a function that is called uh, file management. So in file management, OS has access to the actual file, then the hardware, that is the hard disk, and it handle reader also had the read and write permission. Then it also does the memory management. So in memory management, it allocates memory for each process, looks that key one program is not stealing data from another program. And lastly, the last function of OS is called responsibility. Of OS is called the input output management. It manages the input and output devices connected to our computer or etc. So yeah. So now what is the difference between the user space and the kernel space? So before, like in Linux, all functions were initially in the kernel space, but as the new GUI based uh, mm, operating system were developed, like my Windows or Mac, the user space also had a part, like the application could directly run on the user space, so that the user space don't actually have the direct access to the hardware, and so that it can't cause privacy issues or crashes. So what user space actually is, it manages programs. For example, we are trying to run Microsoft Paint or a game, so we actually are running on the user space and not directly on the hardware. So user space don't actually have the direct permissions to access the hardware. It actually requests the kernel space for those functions, and when the kernel space allows it, it is actually able to perform this function. So what the now the question arises: what is kernel space? So kernel space is basically space which actually directly communicates with the hardware and the CPU, etc. So it performs function that I previously discussed, the responsibilities like process creation, memory management, etc. Like the device accessing the drive, handling the device. So why do we actually separate them, you ask? So if they were not separated, for example, our application Microsoft Paint, like I previously discussed, might try to steal your data, or like a part of the memory, for example A to Z is allocated to Zoom, and we open Chrome, for example. So Chrome might think Chrome did not know ki the part of A from A to Z is already occupied by the paint. So what it might do is it could decide, let me write from J to 1, J to 1, like a random memory address, I would call, I'm calling that. So it would actually overwrite and cause problems with another function and cause programs to crash. So we don't want that. So we decided to separate them. So now that the two spaces are separated from each other, like the user space is separate from the kernel space, how do we actually communicate between both of them? So we communicate between each of them with a special call that is called the system call. So system call is basically a medium how both of them communicate, and actually the program is able to perform functions, and the application is able to run. For example, a certain program, let's say Chrome, wants something from our disk, like a file. So how would it access it? It's currently running on the user space. It don't have access directly to the memory. So what it will do is called a read system call in the system. Then the system call, like currently running on the user space, which switch to the kernel space, read from the actual hardware. The kernel space has actually direct access to the hardware, so it would read from there, input it into buffer. Then once the buffer is full with the output we wanted, after seeking permissions from the hardware and the kernel space, the communication between them, once we have the access and the input is finally what we wanted inside the buffer, we switch back to the user space and return the output. That's how the communication between both of them work. So it could also the memory part, it could be also done by a shared memory, like the both of them are writing and allocating and communicating via a shared memory, or it could be done by a pipelining. So yeah, so now that I have discussed the read example also, so why can't we like program hardware directly? The most important question, like I discussed, key due to security issues and stability issues. So yeah, that's all. I think. Thank you for listening. If you listened, thank you.